Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this event today. I'm very glad to see the room is very full. I also want to say hi to our guests on the video feed, and I'm excited for this conversation today. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Donatienne Rui. I'm the director of the Abshire-Inamori Leadership Academy here at CSIS. It's a very long name. Ayla is what we go by most of the time. I'm also a fellow in the Europe, Russia, Eurasia program at CSIS. The reason we're organizing this event out of our program is that CSIS has a dual purpose. We try to come up with solutions to complex policy challenges for today and tomorrow, but we also try to support the leaders in national security and foreign policy for today and for tomorrow. This is why we're hosting a conversation on careers at the State Department today. And for this, we have our guest here, Ross Kaplan, who is a senior advisor in the Bureau of Counterterrorism Office of the Senior advisor in the Bureau of, I think I have a typo in there. Anyway, Counterterrorism Bureau, Office of the Special Envoy for the Global Coalition to Defeat ISIS, and you lead the Africa Focus Group, Ross. Ross has 24 years of experience as a Foreign Service Officer and Foreign Affairs Officer at the State Department. He has deep expertise in civilian assistance programs in sub-Saharan Africa, experience in political military affairs, non-proliferation, reconstruction, stabilization, take your pick. And I believe you've also spent time overseas as a political officer. A couple of fun facts. Ross plays drums in a jazz band and has performed stand-up comedy. So maybe if this is becoming a little too slow because it's early afternoon, we'll have Ross make a bunch of jokes. So, Ross, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I actually wanted to start off with something very serious, and that is that my 9-year-old son yesterday and I spoke, and I said, hey, Sammy, tomorrow I'm going to be speaking at CSIS. CSIS, he asked, what's that? I said, oh, well, that's a think tank. He said, a think tank? He said, what's that? I know what a dunk tank is. I know what a shark tank is. And then I said, oh, no, it's a think tank. It's where they have very big thoughts, these people, and they write papers and they do research. And then he said, oh, I get it. And then afterwards you throw a ball at them and they fall into the dunk tank. So I'm glad that I cleared that up with him.
Well, I'm glad we're not actually doing that today. But also just for people's awareness, the way we're going to go through this event today, Ross and I will have a bit of a conversation trying to go through the basics of working at the State Department. And then we'll open up to a conversation with all of you. One of my colleagues will be running a mic for the people in person. And then for anyone online, there is a form where you can add questions, and I will be reading them from this iPad. So if you have questions, start thinking about them. And if you're online, start writing them in the form. But Ross, let's start with your career at the State Department. How did you start at State? Why was it something that you considered based on the career thoughts or plans that you had for yourself? And then how has it evolved since then?
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is very exciting for me. And I hope I can give some added value to you spending time with us today. I always wanted to be involved in international affairs. Whether it's in high school watching Nightline or in college studying international affairs and Middle Eastern affairs, and then working for a few years before I went to graduate school. I went to Johns Hopkins CSIS down the street, and then I did a Fulbright in Morocco before starting at State. I think it's really helpful to have a full breadth of knowledge and just to be open to a whole range of ideas to work in international affairs and at the State Department. From the Fulbright in Morocco, I came to State. I'm here 24 years ago, and it's been a very interesting and rewarding experience to be, as in any career. There are difficulties that come with any job or any career. Otherwise, someone is selling you a bag of goods if they tell you otherwise. But largely, it has been really exciting, filled with opportunities I hadn't imagined. But to the question, I wanted to work in Middle East affairs, and I'd done that a bit before starting at State. But working at state enabled me to work well beyond working on Middle East affairs. I worked so bureaus are larger than offices. Bureaus have many offices. I worked in the Bureau of International Organizations and worked on UN issues. I had, in peacekeeping, that was my first job. I had worked in Near East affairs. I was one of the founding members of a team that founded the Middle East Partnership Initiative, the diplomatic soft arm of the response to September 11th. I was there for a number of years, which brought me to many, to do work in many North African and Middle Eastern countries. That was really great. I had then gone on to work in Egypt in Consulate General Alexandria. The State Department has embassies, we have consulates, we have 270 diplomatic missions across the world with 25,000 civil and foreign service officers working both here at the State Department in Washington, D.C. and all over the world. And after working as a political officer in Consulate General Alexandria, Egypt, I had come back and worked at SCRS, which was the Secretary's Office of Construction and Stabilization. That bureau no longer exists. It's now called CSO, Civilian Stabilization, CSO. It's the same work, but they had become a bureau and they got their own acronym, which is what everybody aspires to in the State Department. After that, I had worked in international security, non-proliferation, and worked then in the political military affairs, and now I'm in the Bureau of Counterterrorism, and it's been really great. That just shows that there are a lot of different areas you could work in, whether it's functional, right? I mentioned some of those international organizations, or the CSO, right? Or you can work in a regional bureau, Europe, Western Hemisphere, China, Africa, Near East affairs. So you would be well suited if you could do both and get that experience. Some people choose to put the preponderance of their time in just a functional bureau, in just a regional bureau. And that's your choice, right? What interests you, how talented you are to get to mobilize. And when you're at the State Department, in order to apply for jobs, even on the inside, it's difficult, all right? You know, you are now competing against other people when there is an internal advertisement, for example. And you have to consider whether it's an open position to the public and folks inside the State Department, or it's just internal to the State Department. Either way, there'll be different sets of considerations for your candidacy and competition, but competition's even greater sometimes when it's an internal competition for a job. But I hope that answered the question.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great segue into the next one I wanted to talk about. You went through so many different aspects of the State Department. Let's talk a little bit about the different career paths into state and inside. You just talked about the regional bureaus, functional bureaus, offices, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about the different tracks to get into State Department? So I think a lot of people here are familiar with foreign service officers, civil servants, appointees. What are the different ways people come in?
Sure. There are, so here are different categories of employees working at the State Department. There's the Foreign Service, Civil Service, contractors, interns, and fellows. All have their unique way of applying and getting in. First, I'll address how I got in. Back in the last century, when I applied to the State Department, there was a program called the PMI program, Presidential Management Internship. Someone named Monica Lewinsky had slightly tainted the I in PMI, so they changed it to PMF. So Presidential Management Fellowship, it was then called. Still around today. I would recommend anybody who goes to graduate school interested in working in the government not just the State Department, look into this. Whether you are doing a master's, as I did, law school, business, a PhD, anything as long as it's within your graduate studies and you are at the beginning of your last year, that renders you eligible to apply for this PMF fellowship. It's for a career. There are PMF folks all over the government. And it's pretty much a special endorsement. If you get in there to the program, you then can apply to positions throughout the government. And if you're entrepreneurial, you can have someplace create a position for you that isn't even available or created. And then it has a ladder. It used to be that you started out as a GS9, 11, then 13, and then you're in the system. They're required to give you training during those 2 years in the program, and I got to work overseas at Hardship Embassy Paris during that time. And you could also, you can write your own ticket as to how you want to maneuver, so it gives you a lot of flexibility. Then you're in the ladder and in the system. That's answering how I got in, and I'd recommend that you look into that. It's really excellent. Regarding the different methods I mentioned, the Foreign Service. Okay, the Foreign Service offers an exam. It's offered 3 times a year. It's in, I believe, February, June, and October. You apply, and then you come in to take a written exam, and then there's an oral exam, and then you wait on a list until they are ready to call you in. And I would recommend that anybody interested look at careers.state.gov. So the State Department is state.gov, but for anything career-related, including the FSO exams, careers.state.gov. And you can find out about the particulars of the exams, when they're offered, how you get in. And then there are different cones that you can choose once you are taken off of the list, if there is a need. And people are weighted on the list. They get different scores once they pass the written and oral exams. And then you have to wait, and then you're called in, and then you have a particular cone that may interest you, whether it's political or econ or management or consular cone. There are different cones that you could choose to go in on that path, which does not prevent you from doing work outside of that cone. It just means that that is the path that you've chosen, and there are certain kind of requirements to elevate yourself in your career within that cone. There's even a chance to change your cone choice later in the career, so there's some flexibility with that. That's the Foreign Service. So I was going to talk more about, doesn't matter. Civil service. I mentioned one way to get in. There is another big black hole way to do that for those interested in big black holes. It's called USA Jobs.
Everyone's familiar, apparently.
Yes. I actually got one job that way. So one can get jobs that way. It's not easy. All jobs listed will be listed at the State Department, are listed both at USA Jobs and, again, at civil service careers.state.gov. So you can find them specifically listed there. If you can't find your way through requesting the algorithms of USA Jobs and having them tell you where jobs are that deal with defense or intel or whatever it might be. Then there are, people do get hired that way, whether it's at the beginning of their careers or mid-career, right? Sometimes folks come in from think tanks, and rather than Dunk and Shark Tanks. But I don't know, I'll look into that. It's possible that once you have a certain number of years working on a particular issue, a hiring manager may want to open up the aperture and see, okay, let's see what kind of applications we get from the outside. And you may get people from certain think tanks, experts in their field, right? Or professors. Those are ways that they could get in. So it's possible for mid-career, even beginning, but I'd say more so mid and latter part of their careers, to come in that way through the 2 methods I mentioned, USA Jobs and civilservice.state.gov. Contractors. There are a lot of contractors working all throughout the government. They are an essential backbone and enable us to do our work. In my office specifically, there really is no difference between civil service, foreign service, and contractors. They're given the same respect and given the same work as anybody else. And I think that's great. I don't know if that's always the case elsewhere, but I can tell you that through my time at State and specifically in my office, it's been really great working with contractors and seeing what kind of opportunities that they get. That is a great back door to get into the State Department, because if you are able to identify a contractor that provides work and employees to the State Department, right, and you can get on that list and you get your resume forwarded and you interview and are hired, if you prove yourself, you very well may get yourself a job as a civil servant. That happened to 2 people in my office in the last year. So it's you prove yourself well, you can get hired, right? That is something I would recommend looking into, finding out which contractors work with the State Department and applying to those contracting firms that provide said services. They will provide security clearances in order for you to work at the State Department, which is invaluable because they're paying for it. It costs either the State Department or a contractor to help you get a security clearance necessary to work in government. So if a contractor is willing to do that, that's fabulous. And yeah, contractors. Interns. There are different internship programs also found at state.gov. There are summer internship programs where they place you in embassies overseas. It's possible now to work if you're stay in school. Is that the name of the program? There was an internship program whereby you are in school and you're a local student, and you can come work with your internship and get paid as well. There are also paid internships just without having to go to school. It's all there and careers.state.gov. You can look in the search bar for internships. There are fellowships. There are several. I'll highlight 2. There's the Pickering Fellowship and there's the Rangel Fellowship. They tend to recruit for minorities, women, people who have financial needs, and it's fabulous in that they will actually pay for you to go to graduate school for 2 years, give you internships during those summers, and bring you into the foreign service. So that is competitive and is an excellent way to get in. Again, Pickering Fellowship, Rangel Fellowship. And those are the 5 methods of coming into the State Department.
That's a fantastic overview. And you keep setting me up perfectly for the question that follows afterwards. It's almost as if we have talked about some of the questions before.
There are no coincidences.
No. Well, you just talked about Pickering and Rangel, and I think over the last few years, there's been a lot more conversations about the importance of bringing a more diverse workforce to the U.S. government, to foreign policy. Allow me briefly to plug the excellent work that CSIS is doing in this space in our Diversity and Leadership in International Affairs project. But I know there's a specific focus on this at the State Department. A lot of us would call it DEI, or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, but there's an A at the end of the strategy for the State Department, which is Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility. Can you tell us a little bit more about why there is such a focus?
Yeah. The Biden administration has made DEIA a priority for the U.S. government during the Biden administration. And I believe in it. I think it's great because the State Department often comes under scrutiny for being too narrow. There's a pejorative saying, but since we're all friends here and I know none of your names, that the State Department is too pale, Yale, and male. And the DEIA specifically for the State Department looks to rectify both that image and perhaps reality. because the more diverse the applicant pool and colleagues, the more diverse views there are, and accurately representing the U.S. government. What better, when you are overseas working in embassies, you are representing the United States. What better way to represent the United States than to come from all walks of life that the United States draws on, right? Of all people from all different backgrounds, and you still have to be qualified to get these jobs. But when an extra effort is made to be aware of DEIA principles that I just spoke about, making sure that you're including groups that perhaps had not been included previously, you're going to get a more diverse pool of applicants, of opinions, and it'll be more successful, all right? So reflecting America's image, its diversity of people and opinions, and sending those folks to represent us overseas and here at the State Department at home is really the best way to do that. So the DEI is an acronym that's used widely, but at the State Department and throughout the government, we have an A at the end of it, accessibility. Now, I actually benefit from that myself. I am legally blind. It may not be obvious. And the State Department affords me lots of different accessibility and support that I may need, whether it's talking software or a reader, it had been called for many years. Now they call them reasonable accommodation assistants. Now, there's a lot that's not really accessible, but whether it's using PDFs and I need talking software, well, not every PDF is going to work with my JAWS talking software. So I have somebody there who can help me compete, add to what my colleagues in the office and throughout the building and the interagency are doing, and just make it more accessible that way, and to provide opportunities for, totally dumb, inept people like me who can go and provide such, contributions. I just saying in jest. So you can, if afforded an opportunity by merely giving them a person some access, more access that they may not have had earlier, you get many more contributions than you may have previously understood or known about. It's a little bit about the DEI principles we use for both the principles and recruiting, right? If I hadn't been talking about that today, you might think, well, how am I going to get in with my background? There's nobody like me. I have an African-American colleague who often speaks about recruitment, right? If you see people who look like you, who sound like you, who are going through the same experiences in life like you, in internships, in school, in work, well, may be more encouraging for you to want to join our team. And you're welcome to do so, and which is one of the reasons why I tell you about my disability, because I'm able to contribute to the work at State Department with blindness, which is, just to be honest, not an easy thing.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say, I know you said it in jest, but given your career, dumb is not the word I would use.
No.
Well, speaking of contributing to the team, I'm curious how you would describe being at your bureau or the different offices that you've worked in the past. What makes a strong candidate for a job opening at the State Department? Is there a core skill set that can be entry level or someone pivoting mid-career?
So there are foreign service generalists, which I spoke about before, who could take the tests and enter into those different cones I mentioned. And there's foreign service specialists, and there is a different approach. Again, you can find that at careers.state.gov. The specialists may specialize in IT, in medical expertise, because in every embassy around the world, we have doctors, we have nurses, we have a medical facility that is able to support the dozens or hundreds of Americans and locally employed staff who are working there at the embassy. There's also folks who are knowledgeable in buildings, right? Who's going to build these new embassies, right? Somebody who is familiar with architecture and creation of buildings and standards, right? There is a whole bureau that solely looks at that, okay? So there is a background, one may not have considered this, and then there's diplomatic security. So although there may be some Marines at an embassy, the security at the embassy is run by diplomatic security. They make decisions. They're the people who will review your security clearance, by the way, a whole host of things. But they are yet another specialist track to enter the State Department. So buildings experts, medical experts, IT experts, diplomatic security experts. You may come from law enforcement, for example, or you may not have a background in that and you'd like to begin in the diplomatic security field. And what better way to begin than from the beginning, right? You can start in the college or young 20s age and develop a career within the department under any of those as well. Languages. There is a specific, relatively new in the last few years, the program whereby you are for, I don't know if it's 2 or 5 years, I forget. There's a program where you can become an LNA, a limited non-career appointment, foreign service officer as a consular officer. So if you have Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Arabic specifically, you can apply. You would, if accepted, work as a consular officer up to 2 to 5 years. And that's a very specific skill set that you would come in and use. Now, as a generalist, it makes sense, I think, to be open to working on new things or be open to surprises, things you really hadn't considered before. And that will make you successful both here and in the field. I think having languages is very important. Having the ability to learn languages, because if they see that you have languages, then that's great. Then we're going to teach you another language and send you to Poland. You don't know Polish. We see that you know French or Italian, and we see you're able to learn languages. We're going to send you to Poland. You can't choose every post you go to. You have a list of posts, and for the first post, you don't get to choose. But the list of posts after that, you have to bid on those posts. And you have to use your relationships and your corridor reputation and your skill set in order to make your way to a particular post overseas. But don't worry, sometimes mistakes are made, and to have very particular good languages like Japanese, Chinese, or Arabic, you may be sent to non-Arabic, Japanese, or Chinese-speaking posts, which is a little disappointing to me, but I think the State Department has gotten better at that, especially with the need for extremely hard languages in recent years. And in fact, if you either have or you come to state and they teach you and you pass language exams in Arabic or Chinese and maybe Russian, you'll get language incentives. And if you score at a 2.2 or a 3.3 on this 5-level skill set of languages, you will get language incentive pay merely by knowing it and showing up to an embassy and being able to use that. In fact, when you come in to the State Department and you're on that waiting list I mentioned before, you are able to take a language exam in order to potentially bump yourself up the list, where they multiply in the equation a certain percentage that if you pass the test, you get to go up higher up the list, and you'll be in front of other people if you had passed the phone language exam with that language. I don't even remember what the question was.
You covered a good amount of
Okay.
it, so I have 2 more questions, and then we'll turn to Q&A, so start thinking about excellent questions to ask. I'm curious about your work now. So what do you find the most interesting or engaging aspects of your work in the Counterterrorism Bureau? Is there anything that would surprise the audience here?
Well, working on counterterrorism, so I work in the Bureau of Counterterrorism within the Special Envoy's office of the coalition to defeat ISIS. So the surprising thing I'd say is many people think when I say ISIS, they think, oh, that's nice. Weren't they defeated? Like, why are we still doing that? I've even had colleagues at the State Department say that to me. That should surprise you. Good thing I didn't say that out loud and that nobody's listening. Whoops.
Yes.
All right. So, but it's okay. Yes, ISIS has been militarily defeated in Iraq and Syria, but ISIS is prevalent and running rampant all throughout Africa. That's what I work on. I lead the Africa Focus Group. And ISIS-K, which is reminds me a lot of Special K. I think Kellogg should come out with an ISIS-K. Boy, that's delicious. But that's just
I don't know that would sell very well.
Well, I'm not a very good businessman. What can I say?
Good thing you work at the State Department.
Amen. So ISIS-K, for example, was not well known until they took responsibility for attacking the Russian building and killed many people just about a month or so ago. And then Russia and Europe woke up and said, oh, this is a problem. And so now ISIS-K is on the front lines of foreign policy interests for Europe, the United States. It always has been for us, but now it's more prevalent given their success in carrying out large-scale attacks. But I work on terrorism, counterterrorism within Africa. It's very complicated. Not only do you have ISIS all throughout sub-Saharan Africa, you also have Al-Qaeda, you have Al-Shabaab, you have JNIM, you have a whole bunch of different groups, and it's a lot to manage. There are also coups going on in Africa, and the whole other set of issues going on. And but I never thought that I'd be working on African issues. My work has brought me to countries that I hadn't thought much about previously, and I've been afforded the great privilege of being able to go there and put together conferences on defeating ISIS and speaking at these events. And it's been really a pleasure and a lot of fun. I'll even say that maybe the zenith of my career thus far has been putting together one of these African focus groups in Marrakesh and putting together these very high-level folks in the room and delivering a speech in Arabic, which is something I had never been able to do before at State Department, and it was really exciting. So to pull together some different skills, and it worked. It worked well for me, so that was really great. And for the office, showing that Americans aren't always bad with languages, and it's good outreach, and definitely whatnot. Don't forget the whatnot.
Were you able to build in some jokes in Arabic, or?
I was not dumb enough to do that.
Okay, that's probably a good call.
Yeah.
And then my last question. State Department is obviously dealing with really complex foreign policy challenges all the time that involve a lot of stakeholders, a lot of views. I know, never heard of that. But also a lot of opinions inside the building too. How does the organization balance these different views, the different opinions, to craft a policy that best serves U.S. interests and U.S. values?
The State Department's purpose is to represent the President and U.S. interests abroad and at home. All right. The inside baseball answer to that question. There are a lot of stakeholders, and some of the most difficult conversations are not with our foreign partners. They're often between internal stakeholders, so between regional bureaus and functional bureaus, right? We all have to speak with one voice. We can't just, not every bureau can send out public affairs messages saying different things. That would not work well. So we have to speak with one united voice. Decisions have to be made. There has to be consensus. And how the sausage is made is We all have to speak to each other. We sometimes will disagree. We often will disagree. But the idea is we have to weigh the different equities of different bureaus, all of which is important, and reflect that on what the policy is. And if there are disagreements between different bureaus, well, it might be brought to the interagency process. Foreign policy is not made in a vacuum. And in fact, you might have USAID, Defense Department, the intelligence community involved in particular issues. The agencies relevant will be involved in depending upon the relevant issue, and we will discuss it at the higher level. When it comes out of the State Department, we will discuss it at the interagency level. You might hear about that in the news or CNN. And if whether there is disagreements or not, it will have to rise up to the National Security Council, and they will have to discuss it there. And ultimately, either the State Department, in conjunction with the Defense Department, depending upon whatever the issue is, or alone as the State Department, or if it's something is contentious, it has to go through the National Security Council, and the President has to represent and make a decision, right? So it's complicated. It's not easy. There's a lot of considerations because everyone in the building might come to the party, so to speak, and say our points and our considerations important too, and include it. And sometimes you have to be a team player, and you have to realize when you have to give up pursuing something then and perhaps pursue it at another time when the time is right. That's an art. That's internal diplomacy, right? And this is something also very relevant that I'm sure you do with your colleagues or should do with your colleagues, or mom and dad or classmates or whomever. So those are some considerations about how policy is made and how it's not easy and who the players are.
I think I would have a hard time trusting it if you said it's easy all the time and we just come to consensus very quickly. So let's turn now to yes.
And if I may,
yes.
That often is the reason why it takes so long for important decisions to be made, because if it were easy, decisions would be happening quickly. But because we need to get input from our embassy or from foreign partners, let alone within the department and different bureaus and all this discussion, well, the diplomatic answer would be it's complicated. The realistic one is it's a mess. I mean, there's a lot at stake to make these things happen. And, if you make a wrong decision, use the wrong words, it can have great influence, unexpected. So we have to be very careful, which is why it's slow moving sometimes or often.
That's a good addition. No, you're good. That's a good addition. Okay, we're going to turn to Q&A. If you have a question in the room, please raise your hand. Wait until someone brings you a microphone. I have a list of online questions, but we'll start with the room first. Let's go. Did someone? Okay. And please introduce yourself and make sure your question is a question, not in think tank fashion, a 10-minute comment with a question.
And if you're a student, where you go to school or what you're doing in life.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Sophie. I'm a rising senior at Emory University, and I'm a research intern for IWP. I was just wondering if you could speak to the utility of a law degree in the State Department, or is that even useful in the State Department?
Good question.
It is useful. There are a lot of lawyers. There is L Bureau, which is the legal bureau, and they deal with everything from providing input on that internal building discussion regarding whether it's legal to hire someone locally, or building an embassy, or allowing your spouse to work on the local economy. What we can say to in the United Nations Security Council resolution or not. If something is too sensitive, got to send it to L, meaning they have to take a look at it and weigh in, and most likely put the kibosh on it, if you ask me. Often L will be very by the letter of the law, which is how they should be, right? So there's a whole bureau doing everything. Contracts, regarding the contractors that I spoke of earlier. Every aspect of the State Department that you can imagine, they have an office that is available and should look at it. So it's very useful. There are even my colleague in my office, although he's working on counterterrorism, he is a lawyer, and he's great at what he does, which is not law. So it's a very fungible skill, law, and it's I think it's very good for no matter what you're going into in life. I would not recommend going to law school just because your dad did it or you don't know what else to do, so I'm going to go to law school. I would suggest taking a few years off and trying different fields to see to answer the questions you have about working at that place or working in that field before you commit yourself to great expenses and time in a degree. I waited a few years between undergrad and graduate school. And then even in law school, you can apply for the PMF program that I spoke of before.
That's good to know. Thank you. We'll take a couple questions that are on a similar topic from the viewers online, which is about military experience. So one is asking, is military experience taken into consideration for qualification for positions? And related to this, another question was, could U.S. military reservists apply for state positions, including overseas opportunities or contractors?
When applying for civil service positions, time in service is taken into consideration, and in fact, you are given, if you're a vet, you get something like 10%, I believe, bumped up and preferential treatment in the application process to work in whatever the subject matter is. There is a political military bureau, which has all the folks of all the fields that I spoke about, and has many reservists, folks from the Defense Department working there on loan for a year or three, right? A lot of folks with background in the military will work there. So and they work on all sorts of things from peacekeeping to SOFA agreements with foreign countries, status of forces agreements, rather, SOFA. We're not just all sitting around on sofas, deciding what we can agree upon. And I think I answered both.
Yes, that's great. We'll take another question here in the front, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you for being here. My name is Jessica. I'm an incoming second-year master's student at CSIS. Johns Hopkins, sorry. I was wondering, to the extent that you can answer, how much does your position personally / your general roles in the State Department change per administration, if at all?
That's not at all because there are elections coming up or anything.
No. I have been working I've worked for Presidents Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, and I still have to be there. And I have to put aside my personal views and serve policies and the president. And, you can't be an internal activist, but policies may change from president to president, sometimes drastically. And you have to put aside your grievances or personal opinions, and you have to be a professional, right? You have to be prepared for a new president to come in and to change things, the direction of something, and sometimes it may even be drastic, and you may not even like it sometimes, but that's what being a professional is all about. And there is room, however, if you disagree with something that's happening, you could raise your voice and say, I disagree with this, or I recommend this instead, or there are ways to dissent. There's even what's called a dissent channel for FSOs working overseas who can write a cable that can go specifically to the Secretary of State, him or herself, which he or she reads. And so it definitely will be read by the Secretary of State. So there are ways to influence the system. If you really are not being heard, there are dissent channels. And there's also whistleblowing opportunities. The whistleblowers are supposed to be protected. A whistleblower sees something that shouldn't be and reports it. And you're supposed to be protected. Yeah.
Great.
I hope I answered
I'll
that.
take another one in the room. This sir in the middle right here, I saw your hand before, so.
Hi, my name is Jake. I'm a senior. I'm going to be a rising senior at Tulane University. Thank you so much for coming. I was just wondering, if I'm going to graduate and I'd like to go either Peace Corps or I'd like to go teach English maybe in China, somewhere in Asia, how can I get the best of that experience to one day serve either in the Foreign Service, Civil Service, in the State Department?
A lot of folks come into the State Department as former Fulbrighters and Peace Corps volunteers. Actually, your time in the Peace Corps will be, if you get a job in the federal government and you've done Peace Corps, you actually will get time served, meaning if you started a GS-9, you might start at a GS-9 Step 3 with the time that you've already put in at the Peace Corps. So you get credit already. And by the way, every government service GS position has 10 steps, each of which, as you go up the ladder, will give you more money. So I'm pointing out that with putting in 2 years in Peace Corps, you might go one or a few steps higher and be recognized for that volunteer work already. Not the case with Fulbright. You'll be in good company, as many people have already served in that. It also will show that you are well experienced in doing the kind of work that FSOs do overseas as a Peace Corps volunteer. So that's really great background. I hope, was there something more that I could answer?
Just to get the most out of that experience to better serve in the Foreign Service.
Learn that foreign language as much as possible. Yeah.
Great. I'll take one from online. Someone had a question specifically on contractors and contracting companies. Are there some specific ones that you can recommend? And do they each have a particular focus of the contractors that you've seen in your office?
It's hard to know the list of contractors. It's not as if there's this secret hidden list, although if you were so inclined, it used to be back when they published books, I don't know how it is now, they would list the previous year's contracts at USAID, so you'd know to whom all the contracts went, because these are your tax dollars, so you ought to know this, and it's usually for tax dollar and transparency purposes, but you should use it for going to get a job. So for contracts and AID, that's my answer there, and I bet many of those will also do work for the State Department as well. Do some good Googling. Ask some folks who you know at State Department, hey, what are some contractors in your office there? It's not a hidden secret. There's lots of ways to be creative. If you came here today and you go to these schools that you're mentioning, you could figure it out easily just by networking and some of the methods I just said.
Great. We'll take another question. Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Faiza. I'm a junior at George Washington University, and I'm an intern at U.S. ASEAN Business Council. I really appreciate the conversation you had about diversity and was interested to hear different types of initiatives within the workplace that has changed for diversity inclusion.
Say the question again, please.
No problem.
Yeah.
I was interested in different types of initiatives within the State Department that encourages diversity and just the work culture overall.
So to be clear, the diversity efforts are made in hiring managers' awareness of and inclination to pull from different backgrounds that haven't been represented traditionally. And you might, I don't know if there's really opportunities for you to put that in an essay or your name, but once you get to the interview stage, it'll be apparent, as well as you could speak about that and your interest to help expand the pool of views and employees there. It's not as if there is a program, you apply to the DEIA program, then you're in. No. But I did mention earlier two fellowships that deal with that. That's the Pickering and Rangel Fellowships. And that has existed a long time, and that has been a method of getting into the State Department for a long time. And so that's a DEIA principle that we've been advocating for long before the DEIA term has been in fashion. So it's supposed to, the DEIA principles that each bureau at state and then different agencies in the federal government were supposed to have created specific to their bureau and how they're dealing with it. It varies, but I hope that I addressed that a little better. If not, please ask something more.
Did that address your question?
I was also referring to, are there any mentorship programs within?
Oh, there are mentorship programs.
I am not aware of mentorship programs to apply to get you in. However, once you're in to the program, there are mentorship programs for entry-level folks. Yeah, but not to bring you in. No, not that I know of.
I think that was the question, is once you're in, what that looks like inside. But in just the few minutes that we have left, I want to take one more question online, and we'll take one more in the room, because I also want to bring in the perspective of mid-career folks and just maybe non-traditional paths into the State Department. Someone asked if a stay-at-home mom can make her skills valuable at the State Department. They suggested, people skills, conflict resolution, management skills. What would you say to something like that?
Thanks to COVID, and I mean this in an authentic and a positive way, folks are able to work, to telework from anywhere. And we have folks who are working all over the country who had once lived here in the area, and even all over the world by telework. And even for stay-at-home moms, there are opportunities to do such things. Some people are teleworking still 4 days a week, and other folks even 100%, which is as if you were able to work that out with your managers. Yeah, so it's so thanks to COVID, these things are possible, and there is actually an affinity group for mothers and working parents at state, and they advocate for concerns internal, right? And that's a great thing to go to too. And so you have advocates internally also once you're there.
Great. Maybe, is there I do not want to silence students in the room, but I want to make sure we also get questions. Is there anyone here who's not a student who wants to ask a question? Sir, over here, I saw your hand earlier.
I'm a part-time student and a full-time professional, so
Perfect.
That's why I was like, kind of.
Still counts.
Yeah, so my name is Adam. I am a program coordinator at the Seeger Center for Asian Studies at GW, so I apologize, it's not CSIS. I'm also a part-time master's student in Asian Studies at GW. So my question, I have two really quick questions. So the first one also goes to the mid-career professionals. So there's, just talking among my other mid-career professionals, we're very discouraged from applying for state because the application process takes so long, and we still have to make money, So what is the best path, and what advice do you have for mid-career professionals? And also, once you're in state, what efforts do you have for foreign service officers who are LGBTQIA to make sure they're safe wherever they're serving, especially with increased hostility at home and abroad towards LGBTQIA members of the LGBTQIA community, especially trans people?
Thank you.
I heard that there's this discouragement with the application process, but how is that different from anyone having to apply and it being a long process? I don't understand that.
So just the 2-year waiting period leaves a lot of people in limbo, at least that I've talked to, and they feel like, okay, how am I supposed to move forward in my career path if I'm stuck here waiting in this application? And I'm trying to choose between moving to another position or picking this position. For example, myself, I waited 1.5 years for the Peace Corps, and when I found out, I had already started a master's program and had to say, sorry, I can't join the Peace Corps. I've already moved and changed my whole career path.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, it sounds like you were unfortunately had to choose between 2 good options, which is a great position to be in. And yeah, unfortunately, sometimes there is a waiting period and we can't choose one over the other. One has to make their own personal decision if they want to do it or not. True. It is possible to work while waiting. You could even try working if you're interested in getting more experience at state by doing contracting or civil service positions. One could do that. It's also possible not to pass the foreign service exam and get to the point that you are, fortunately, on the list and waiting. Lots of people don't pass after several times. Some people pass it on the first try. It's life is a mixed bag, and you have to make your own personal decisions. All of us do. Even people in the foreign service are told where to go, and they can't come home, and they keep uprooting themselves every few years, which has an effect on relationships and or children making and then breaking relationships and starting over again if you're in a foreign service family. But if you're interested, stick with it and try several times until you pass and stay on the list until you get the position. If you have hard to learn languages, as I mentioned earlier, take that exam, whether it be, no matter what your language, you can get a multiplier effect on your weighting on the list, but you'll get a higher score if you pass and have the harder languages, super hard languages they call it, Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, Russian. Farsi may be a close second, I'm not quite sure, Urdu and Hindi. LGBTQ, there is an LGBTQ affinity group at the State Department. There is an office, given that the State Department is representing our issues and who we are, projected overseas in our work and who we are. We're representing American people and cultures and American products and Hollywood and bringing American bands over there and showing people abroad who we are. There are LGBTQ members of the Foreign Service and Civil Service. They're out. They are welcomed. There are affinity group. There is one affinity group for them. There are policies that deal with LGBTQ across the board, and talking points and policies are brought into it, no matter what the bureau and whatever the region. It is, I'm amazed in the years I've been at state how inclusive LGBTQ issues and folks have been brought into the mainstream in what we are doing. It's quite amazing, actually. I've seen that's really been a significant change.
Can I just plug in just on the final part of your question on the safety of those officers abroad? Are there specific policies? Is there a broader office of safety for specific foreign service officers who might be concerned about that?
Being LGBTQ?
In some countries where it's probably not as welcome. And if you don't know, that's okay. I think it's a fair question.
when you are of a particular background, you may decide personally where not to go and ask that question of a desk officer when bidding on a job. All right? Nobody will force you to go someplace, and that's your personal decision if you want to go or not. I'm Jewish. I served in Egypt. I speak Arabic, I speak Hebrew, French, Chinese, Moroccan Arabic. But I didn't tell anybody I'm Jewish because that would have been dumb during the Arab Spring. It wouldn't prevent me from living there. And I'm not LGBTQ. I don't know what the considerations are, but I think anybody concerned about that has the ability to have the discussion with assignment officers, with the desk officer, ask people serving at posts. That's what people do. Hey, how was it in that job specifically with your portfolio? Is there anybody there who's LGBTQ or with whom I could speak? And they'll put you in touch. Or they may tell you, yeah, I'll put you in touch, but the real word is something else. But that's really the best I can tell you about it. There are certain Western European countries or European countries where you may choose to go because you're knowledgeable that it's safer there versus other countries that I won't mention.
I think that's a great answer, and hopefully that helps you, sir. Unfortunately, we are at time, but I really wanted to thank you, Ross, for coming here today, for talking to us about this. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I hope you learned as much as I did. I know there were a lot of other questions because it can be such a Byzantine process, but hopefully this was a good first step. And if there is interest, please reach out to us. If maybe a second version of this event would be interesting, or a live Q&A with Ross of the State Department. But I also want to thank our staff and our streaming team for making this event possible. Please join me in thanking Ross for joining us today. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you. And if I can now interest you in this pyramid scheme that I want to present to you all.
Cut the feed.